it's a bigger problem than you think.
Every case that comes forth, there's at least 7 or 8 cases out there.
It's a major public health concern, a priority issue on the United Nations agenda.
It's morally wrong and it should be eradicated.
And it's perpetuated by a culture of silence.
I didn't think it was anybody's business.
It's everybody's business. It's our collective responsibility to take a stand against this human rights violation.
Gender-based violence is very important on our agenda because it has been called the most pervasive and yet the least recognized of human rights violations. It's a human rights violation that takes place every day, and it affects a significant portion of our population. Estimates range between 1/3 and 1/2 of all women suffering from gender-based violence. And what is particular about gender-based violence is that it tends to be in many societies and in many quarters tends to be tolerated. It has been ingrained as part of our culture, and therefore we see it and we tolerate it, and we do not identify it immediately as a human rights violation.
Gender-based violence includes a range of social ills where physical violence and psychological intimidation are used by one person to control another person. Domestic and spousal abuse, rape, incest, female genital mutilation, child marriage, sex-selective abortions, and trafficking of persons are all examples of gender-based violence. The police crime statistics on women victims in Jamaica for 2007 indicate that there were 712 reported cases of rape, 508 carnal abuse cases, 35 incest cases, and 25 domestic murders. At least 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or abused in some other way, usually by an intimate partner or family member. According to Dr. Veronica Salter, consultant psychologist, victims of domestic violence are often left with deep emotional and psychological scars that require time, often years, to heal.
It's so disturbing because they are so traumatized that they don't function normally, put it that way. I'm not saying that they're abnormal, but they don't function normally. They're traumatized, they're stressed, and they might appear okay to you and I on the surface, but inside they're a mess. They're often numb inside. So a defense mechanism, and it's not done that they actually decide to do that, is that they blank out things.
The testimonies of Janet Moore and her 3 daughters, and that of Onika Grant, clearly demonstrate the physical, psychological, and emotional impact of gender-based domestic violence. In spite of the trauma, the shame, and the culture of silence which still keep many of these incidents in the closet, these women have been bold enough to come forward. They and their families are going through the healing process, and they have made conscious decisions to move on with their lives.
We didn't have any dispute that Sunday, but he knew I was going to move, and I just asked him to take me up by Stony Hill, and he willingly. And reaching an old Stony Hill road, he keeps stopping. And I remember I asked him the 3rd time, what is wrong? And he said the car is boiling. And it stopped and he threw some water into it. And then it started again. And I asked him the same question again when he stopped. And the only thing I noticed, he came around my side and he held me in my ear and he said, if I would leave him for our next man. I said, why you ask me that? I felt when he stabbed me here.
Days after, Janet, while in intensive care at the university hospital, discovered that her partner's violent rage was also unleashed on the children. Goldiana, who was then 16 years old, 9-year-old Kadian, and 6-year-old Tatjona. The two younger children were fathered by her partner, and the couple had been together since Goldiana was 4 years old. Tatjona, now 11, recounts the experience with some difficulty.
I feel sad. Some of the time when I'm at school, children always tease me about it. Some of the time when my classmates always said that I must go up to the principal, and I always sit around and cry.
Good evening.
16-year-old Kadian is now in high school.
To stand up, sir, look it in the face and say, I'm not mounted up in the sky. I'm not mounted to be provided. You made it. Ooh, I'm the greatest.
She too has vivid memories of that Sunday night, 5 years ago. She willingly shows the physical scars, but is less willing to talk about the incident.
You may not even be getting the blow yourself, but when you're at school trying to focus on your schoolwork, you're not able to, so it affects you in a lot of ways. Coming home wasn't excited. I couldn't wait for the morning to come, just to leave the house, to go out. And it's like coming back home, you have this nervous feeling, not want to come home. When you reach even at the gate, you will stand, look. You just don't have that eager urge to go in.
If you're going into a home that is abusive, you're not safe in that home. And these are signs that teachers can look out for, and persons that work with children or youngsters, that they tend to hang around a lot at school. They want to stay behind and do things, and whereas other kids are just designed to get out and get on the streets and go home or be with their friends, but there is an idea that they don't want to go there because of this. They know what they're going into. It's not a peaceful situation. It's not a situation where they can relax, where they feel comfortable. They see this every day. They dread it. They dread what they're being exposed to.
I think it has affected us tremendously, but it has been almost 5 years. Not overcoming it 100%, but we're hanging in there.
Goldiana is now a mother and is completing her associate's degree in accounting and plans to move on to pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree.
I was here in the hall sitting down and he came inside. He closed the door, so I said, open the door. She said, I want to talk to you. So I said, open the door because in here it's hot. I don't want my husband to take me because I haven't slept from last night. So I'm still close the door and go for the fan. I said, I don't want the fan because it's only hot here. And I didn't know that the door was closed with the lock. So I was sitting in a chair. Close to the door, and he said to me, Nika, you not give me a chance. So I said, no, you come back with the same foolishness. I just saw him jump up and took up a long knife like this from off the counter. I just saw like him go like this. After a while, I wasn't feeling anything. My body became numb. And I started praying and said, God, thank you for letting me live to see this age. I could protect Jahim, anybody that is going to raise him.
These experiences mirror many of the telltale signs and eventualities commonly associated with gender-based violence and domestic spousal abuse.
Bad living. Was fighting on and off, and I couldn't cope with it. So I tell him I go and leave him. He always threatened me, say if I leave him, I go kill me. And everywhere I went, he always there. I move up more than once, and he find where I am. But even sometimes when I'm walking on the street, and sometimes I just look behind me, it's him that I see coming. I thought I say I must move back because he will change, but a leopard never changes spot.
In Onika's case, the abuse started during the first year of a 5-year relationship. but she kept it all close to her chest and behind closed doors in the extended family house where she lives.
Because I'm dark complexion, the licks didn't show. So that was the great thing about it and stuff. It started with like, a one box or one push or whatever, and I said, it would get better. I talked to him, he would say that, I'm sorry, I will change. But it started getting worse and worse and worse. And I was always covering up. Nobody in the yard knew about it because I used to hide. If we were in there and he was doing his stuff, I was afraid to cry, I didn't want anybody to hear and all that. But I should have to have 5 brothers and a big sister. I didn't let anybody know. Sometimes I say I must have been stupid because if I had done something then, it wouldn't have gone so far. So I waited too long. But after the incident, the community was there.
So often they say, no, I don't have to get that far. It won't get that far. It won't, because they don't want to face what they really are going through. So, and usually as well, there are honeymoon phases, as we call it, in any abusive situation, where people are full of remorse. And these men are full of remorse because they also are hurting.
It affects me a lot. Although most people say it don't look like I've got through any problem. But sometimes they ever see me by myself. Sometimes I remember, especially my daughter, more time I break down in tears. I don't think 1 week ever pass when I don't cry. But I have to just ask God to give me the health and strength.
Janet, like many other survivors of domestic violence, may never fully overcome the impact. But most importantly, she's not allowing it to hold her back. She agrees that both perpetrators and the victims of domestic violence should seek help. Gender-based violence reflects and reinforces unequal power relations between men and women. Although more victims are speaking out about this human rights violation, many are still keeping it locked between themselves and the perpetrators. And too many individuals and communities that suspect or clearly know what's happening continue to turn a blind eye. Under these circumstances, this crime becomes invisible and naturalized. This attitude that it's their private business and not mine sends the signal that male violence against women is acceptable or normal.
Domestic violence, rape, everything that impacts upon the spirituality of a person, it spills over into the workplace. If you're a victim of domestic violence, or you're even a witness to domestic violence, if you're a victim of rape or incest, or if you're even a witness to it, the trauma is not only for the victim, but all of us who are indirect victims. That goes right into the workplace. It hits upon productivity, because it's either no productivity or low productivity. That is a cost to doing business. It increases absenteeism and sicknesses and illnesses, which go right to the health issue. It comes out of, if you're an employer, it's got to hit your health insurance. It's got to hit your bottom line, because if you have 1, 2, 3, 4 people who are on your payroll who are not able to produce, even if they're at work, and they're not producing to their potential, what do you think is going on with regard to your bottom line?
NGOs like Woman Inc. play a critical role in providing practical intervention strategies to help move women from the victim stage to becoming survivors.
We have the shelter and we have the crisis center. Now, the shelter is there to take in women who are basically running for their lives. Oftentimes they have to run with no clothes, just the shoes, no shoes, nothing, and with their children as well. So we have a shelter that is an emergency, temporary accommodation, just to help the woman get out of the situation and give her a safe place. The backbone to the shelter is really the crisis center, which is here at this premise. And the crisis center is there to provide the walk-in counseling, as well as the 24-hour hotline.
Operating with a small day staff and trained volunteer counselors on the 24-hour hotline, Woman Inc. offers its services free of charge to clients. The organization's main and most consistent source of funding comes from the Woman Inc. Trade Fair, which is held annually in November. Woman Inc. also receives donations from various public and private entities. Its resources are often challenged and stretched, particularly as it tries to respond to the emergency shelter needs of women and girls who are victims of rape, incest, and domestic violence.
During Christmas holidays, upcoming holidays, Heroes Day just passed, We have Easter, which is a long weekend, a festive occasion. Those seem to be the times when we're almost always full to capacity. Oftentimes we are very much full, and we have to try and refer the women. We have to try to find somewhere else that they can go.
This is usually a last resort, as the victim's safety needs to be the focus. And as we learn from both Janet's and Onika's experience, the perpetrators of domestic violence will go more than the extra mile to seek out their victims. Efforts to eliminate the scourge of gender-based violence must be supported by the appropriate legislative framework. Eliminating gender-based violence forms a major part of the United Nations agenda. But although the issue has been placed on the global agenda and is recognized by various international conferences and declarations as a human rights violation, it remains deeply entrenched. The 1993 Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women called on all governments to pursue a policy of eliminating violence against women. This issue formed a major part of the United Nations agenda at the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development, ICPD, that called on all governments to take full measures to eliminate all forms of exploitation, abuse, harassment, and violence against women, girls, and adolescents. It was also a highlight of the 1995 Beijing Conference. Jamaica, a signatory to the program of action of both conferences, is committed to eliminating gender-based violence, and the Bureau of Women's Affairs, which has responsibility for gender-related issues, is playing a lead role in that process. The Bureau has integrated the issue of gender-based violence into its national strategic plan. A significant part of the Bureau's work in this regard involves advocacy and ongoing public education, training, and sensitization, as well as legislative reviews.
And we have had a series of what we call justice system workshops, targeting the judiciary, the police, the clerk of the courts, private lawyers, and we bring together a range of stakeholders within the health sector, so health professionals as well, the correctional services, women's NGOs, the schools, and all of that. And we bring them around a table to dialogue on the issue of gender-based violence. One of the reasons why we sought to really dialogue with the judiciary at this level was because of the complaints at that time that we were receiving regarding how the police dealt with domestic violence and issues of sexual abuse, and also how complaints about how some of the judges were not sensitive. So we brought all of these stakeholders together, and I would say that they were very successful workshops, because we were able to, the issues and the concerns which the common man on the ground had, and also which some of the stakeholders had, we were able to hear those concerns in that setting and move towards seeing how it is that we could implement some programs or addressing the specific issues which were brought to our attention.
The government of Jamaica is taking special measures to address violence against women, and will currently debate what the government of Jamaica will be doing will be combining two pieces of legislation: the Offences Against the Person Amendment Act and the Incest Punishment Amendment Act, which will be combined to form the Sexual Offences Act. And this piece of legislation will be taken to Parliament very shortly, and it will, of course, widen the scope of legislative measures to specifically address sexual violence against women and children. The Domestic Violence Act and the Child Care and Protection Act also continue to be used as a means of redress for women and children. Then there is the draft sexual harassment policy, currently under review for cabinet approval, and is expected to inform the enactment of legislation on the issue.
It's mostly women who are victims of sexual violence and domestic abuse. But we know and we recognize that there are cases too when men are also victimized in these areas. And so I would want to highlight to you that the Domestic Violence Act is framed on gender-neutral lines. And so if it's a case where, you know, the men feel that they have been victimized in this way, they have the same recourse just as the woman.
The government recognizes the urgent need to tackle other forms of violence against women, to protect our women and our girls. And we have enacted legislation to implement the provision of the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially, again, our women and our children.
But while efforts are being made to establish the legal framework and supporting structures, a greater challenge is removing the culture of silence that continues to nurture gender-based violence in our society.
Something in this program has triggered a reaction to you to make you realize that you fit into this category of being an abuser. There's a variety of different reasons for why this has happened, and I'm not saying this to make any excuse for your behavior. But I am telling you that you can be helped. As a victim, you also can go from the stage of being a victim to being a totally functional person, to recover. We call them survivors, but even more than that, I just want to see you as a whole person again, living in your own integrity, feeling good about yourself, not living in fear.
If we are serious about achieving the Millennium Development Goals and building a society in which everybody has opportunities and enjoys human rights, a full enjoyment of human rights, we need to deconstruct the idea that it's okay to batter a woman. We need also to ensure that women in particular understand that they have a right to fulfill their aspirations. And I think that when we achieve that, we will have a society in which not a single woman is victim of intimidation or victim of violence. And this is not an utopia. This is something that we can achieve within our lifetime.
I've survived. I don't stress about it. When I look at my scars, they're just pushing me to reach my stars. I have my son to live for. I don't worry myself. I'm trying to work as hard as I can. I want to go back to school, do my ACCA, but I have to do my surgery first, and then from there I take it one step at a time. I forgive him for what he has done to me. I don't have him up because for me to heal, I have to forgive him. And I'm telling you, by forgiving him, I'm telling you that it's like a light is coming out of me. A light.